I've suffered from writer's block before. I know lots of people that have suffered writer's block before. I know it's a big thing. I also believe that it is a symptom of something else. Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 111 of the podcast, and it is April 26th, 2023, as we record this. Our main topic today is writer's block. What is it? When does it happen? What to do about it? It'll be fun.
Yeah.
We don't have new patrons this week, but thank you so much for the ones that are still around and believing in us and liking the podcast and listening every week. If you are interested in looking at the different tiers and benefits that you get being a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, and the tiers start as low as $1 a month. We have a comment from a listener. J.R. Pierce Nelson said, I felt so called out on this week's episode. It was the SEO one. I downloaded Yoast years ago and haven't done anything with it. So I thought that was really funny. I responded that I myself had yet to download or put, even Google Analytics up. So I was commiserating with her.
Oh, now I feel bad for calling anybody out.
No, she was just joking.
Right.
Okay. My update is I've actually been pretty prolific this past week. And by prolific, I guess I should mean productive. I guess that's a better word for it. I have been continuing to add words to the newest book I'm working on that I'm co-writing with Jay Thorne and Ran Weingartner on writing how-to books.
You're writing a how-to book on a how-to book. How meta
very
can
meta.
we get? Oh my gosh. Wow.
People need to know how to do that though.
My brain just went spun around on a top and I'm going to write a book about a guy writing a book next. That's my thing.
Oh, Stephen King already did that.
Oh no, he beats us. He beats everybody to the punch. Okay.
Sorry, you should still write it. I don't know why you said that. You should still write it, Eric, because it'll be your spin, your story, your characters, and I would totally read it. Okay. I also brainstormed a year's worth of topics for the podcast and my blog.
Oh my gosh.
And I worked on client story diagnosis and coaching, and so I've just been keeping up. And
that's good.
Yesterday I had a meeting with a writing organization here in Eugene, Word Crafters in Eugene, about a workshop that I'm going to be teaching this fall on memoir. So I'm thinking about how to, niche down even more into memoir coaching and how to make the retreat better than it has been. Maybe changing up the workshopping part to include more writing activity in addition to the lectures that I do. So I'm just, I've got a couple conferences booked this fall, so I'm excited about my career. This is things are starting to come in and add up, and it's been career really excitement. Fun.
What must that be like?
I dig my author life.
Good. I'm so glad to. That's your P word is productive. So today's podcast is sponsored by the word P. It'll do it like it's
by the letter
Street.
P, yeah.
By the letter P, the word P. The letter P. It's now,
not
we're now
the
in
word
Sesame
P.
Street. No, that's not how we're doing this today. Oh boy. God, what's my update? My P would probably be productive. I mean, as well. I am concurrently rewriting 2 books. And like I said last time, it's been very helpful because it's really helped me to discipline the story arcs for some sub characters. Not sub characters. I mean, these are kind of like
characters.
Supporting character. Yeah, I think you gave me that term last week, and I liked it. It's hard for me to track that, and I've noticed that just in the whole series scape that I'm in. It's just maybe hard for my brain to do is I know what Melville main character is doing. I know his arc. I know his path of discovery, but what do the supporting people around him experience, and how does that create an arc? Well, this is now forcing me to do that. And I'm really grateful that I've created this problem for myself and solved an even bigger one. So that's that's where I'm at. And you know, I'm keeping up with client work too. I'm actually trying to finish multiple small projects because I have new clients that want in. So I'm trying
Mm.
to finish off some small things. And actually, I have like been working on a partnership with a film producer. Um, he it was kind of interesting. We had like a near falling out that then
Uh-oh.
led to a partnership
Mm.
where basically like I'm gonna be his kind of his, it sounds like I'm just gonna be his writer. Like he develops properties over all sorts of, you know, he develops all sorts of properties and he just needs a writer to write them. And he, you know, basically said, if I give, you know, we came up with an agreement, like, can you give me priority if I give you this? And it was really interesting because it started with this like near falling out where I thought we'd worked together on a few things. So I thought, okay, this is the end of this. And then in one phone call, now it's like the beginning of something new. So
Well, that's cool.
yeah, there was some mea culpas in there. There was some, you know, I could be a better communicator. I could be a better communicator, and boom, everything's awesome. So yeah.
Side note, see previous episode on building professional relationships.
You know, I just when you said that, I was going through my head. It was interesting, right? It was
Hmm.
just, and it was an interesting twist and turn. And I think we were both just pining for a little more honesty from the other one and what was working and
Mm.
what wasn't working. And when we gave it to each other, it opened up a whole new door. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, yeah, I couldn't be happier. I was took myself out after work that day. And I didn't feel
Nice.
bad about it at all.
Celebration.
There we go. What are you reading?
I am still reading The Music Shop
Mm,
by Rachel Joyce because another book jumped the stack. So I read The Sober Diaries by Claire Pooley. It was a memoir. It
mm.
was super interesting. So that was what I just currently, or not currently, but I just finished reading that a couple days ago. So I'm back on to The Music Shop, which I'm halfway through.
Cool. I am still reading Hyperion, although I have had things jump the stack. So I picked up a couple of graphic novels from the library that I read, and this weekend was particularly like taxing. So I spent a lot of time just like, you know, I needed that graphic novel, the soft caress of the graphic novel versus the immersive, you know, the immersive science fiction fantasy that is Dan Simmons. Um, but I reached kind of the point of that book I think it's starting to click in what you know, just why this is such a well-renowned story. So I'm excited to finish it. By the time we meet again for episode 112, I will have finished that book.
All right. Well, that was, I think, a record for our intro in terms of timing.
Yeah, I would say.
Usually we like natter on, which I love about our podcast, by the
I
way.
love nattering. Yeah. Yeah. When the
But
podcast is sponsored by the letter N, I am going to natter like nobody else.
I can
Nobody
tell you have a
else.
young child at home. I haven't remembered
you
the. I
you
remember watching Sesame Street when I was a kid and the letter of the day, you know, and when
yeah.
my kids were little and watched Sesame Street and the letter of the day. So I knew exactly what you were talking about, even though my kids are in their 20s.
I'm going to give heartbreaking details about raising a child in the 2020s. My son has never seen Star Wars, Mr. Rogers, or Sesame Street. He has no interest in any of
Oh,
it. Even though he's a little like Mr. Rogers and Fred Rogers, he's very like kind, he's very giving, he's very like into being nice and genuine. He
does he
has no
change his
interest.
shoes every day?
Because he has to put on his shoes to go run out and find his friends. There are days that I'll like, in the time it takes me to drink a beer, he's taken his shoes on and off like 50 times. He's like, oh, they're outside. He puts his shoes on and he runs. And then, oh, they're going back in. He comes in, takes his shoes off. It's like you know, it's like the little hurdle on his way, you know, and it's like it's the bottleneck in his childhood, you know, his youthful zeal.
Oh,
But
that's some
no,
good, something to slow him down every once in a while.
because yeah, if he hit the driveway running, it could be dangerous for anybody in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
He's a bit of he's the Tasmanian devil when it comes to getting out there to see those kids. So let's talk about writer's block, shall we?
We shall. Okay.
Give us a minute to think about what to say, because I can't, somehow I'm stuck. I can't
You're
think of
blocked.
anything to say. Yeah, I'm blocked. Just kidding. No. Dad joke. There you go.
Sponsored by.
Sponsored by. Yeah. What do we call, like, you had a really great way to put it before we went on, and I think you
Oh,
should, like, introducing it there
okay.
would be a great way to go. I don't
So
mean to serve that to you, but like I think you did a great job.
segue. Um, I think, I mean, I've suffered from writer's block before. I know lots of people that have suffered writer's block before. I know it's a big thing. I also believe that it is a symptom of something else. So we can have writer's block, but the cause of the writer's block are many. The causes are many.
Causes are many.
So,
And you think people, when they have writer's block, focus on it's the manuscript, it's the writing? You think, is that where? I think that's what I hear people say. Like, oh my gosh, I have writer's block. Something's wrong with the story, or something's.
well, I mean, that could be true. That could certainly be possible. And in fact, that was actually what created my biggest ever writer's block in my writing past, because I think I shared this story on the podcast already. I had started writing a novel, actually wrote the whole thing, and I gave it to my critique group, and they were like, thumbs down. They didn't like the main character. So I rewrote the main character's backstory, made her stronger, and I replotted it all out. And I got to the place where I needed her to do the thing that she needed to undo at the end of the book to make it work. And she wouldn't do the thing because she was stronger, and it wasn't something she would ever have done.
Oh.
So then I was like, expletive. What am I going to do now? And I thought about replotting it, and I ended up like polling all of the writers I know, like, how do I get out of this thing? What do I do? How do I make this? So I got some good advice finally, but at that point I had started writing something else because it was just taking too many months. I couldn't figure out how to get out of that. So in that case, it was the story. It was, something was inherently wrong with something in the story, and that's why I couldn't move forward. But
Interesting.
yeah. But
that would be an interesting barrier to hit. I need you to make this mistake, but now you're too strong to make that mistake, so I have to figure out what else. Yeah.
How can you still make this mistake and still be strong? Yeah. So it turned out it had to be like a natural disaster. That was the only thing that's going to make her move out of her house.
Tornado. That's the only thing that's going to work, is a tornado.
I think it was a flood or a fire. I can't even remember what I was going to decide to do.
Acts of God.
They something in her house that made it so she had to move out. Anyway, the other times when I procrastinate. I think that's really what it ends up being. It's more procrastinating for me than writer's block. I find lots of other things to do, and I feel like I trick myself into thinking that they're more important, and so I don't get to the page. So that's not writer's block in my brain, but it certainly could be for someone else.
And it manifests like it, because you're not committing the mental energy to the story that you should be. I hate to say should be, but you should be.
Yeah. So I think for me personally, those are the two occurrences where writer's block gets in the way for me, or how it manifests for me, I guess I should say.
As I said before we started, I am a jerk, and I rarely, if ever, I don't think I can ever remember like a genuine I'm sitting down and can't come up with anything feeling. But what I get is, because and anybody who's listened to this podcast know that I work on a lot of things simultaneously, and I think I can do that because I've kind of just trained my brain to be always looking for story and on the lookout for many things. But I think what happens sometimes is, and it's probably happens to a lot of writers too, is if you have that brain that's just, always looking for story, sometimes the story you're sitting down with is not the one that's your brain's really ready to write. For example, I've got this really cool short story idea. I think it's kind of based on my neighborhood and my experience. I kind of turned it into a little kind of weird fiction thing. And I always think I'm ready to write it, but I'm just not ready to write it. And so because I'm writing something else. I'm actually committed to writing my novel, and this is just a short story. So do I have, I have writer's block for that story, but I don't have writer's block. So I think that might be something too. If you have many ideas that you're fleshing out or you're giving your energy to, and you're stuck on one, it might be worth considering. If you're stuck on story A, is that time to look at story B? Like maybe it's the other thing that you're developing. I think that's for a lot of writers, that could be something too.
I think there's a lot of other, again, like we talked about, it's a symptom. And so my brain goes to, well, what's causing it then? So
Right.
I heard you say you're just not ready to write the story for whatever reason. And so it becomes more of a situational block. It's not just
Right.
an overall, I can't write. I'm in this place. You try to resist telling yourself that story.
Right.
That you
Right.
have writer's block. I mean, that might be the symptom again, that might be your reality right now, but finding out why, become the detective and figure out, is it the manuscript that's broken? Why are you procrastinating? Is it because you're afraid to write what you have to write in front of you? Sometimes when you're writing memoir or fiction, and you're writing something that's really traumatic and it's triggering for you,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
then that doesn't mean you have writer's block if you have to step back and do some self-care. That just means that's your writing process. And
Yeah.
that for this particular thing, it's going to take you a little bit longer to write. And maybe you can only write a couple hundred words a day when it's this passage of the manuscript. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I've worked with a few clients on memoir projects that, they feel like, yeah, I'll have them report to me that it's the writer's block. And then I'll look at the material, and then I'll say, I don't know, like, let's give yourself a break here, because
Yeah.
this is hard
Hmm.
material. So yeah, people don't give themselves that break, unfortunately. Or that it's hard. Look, it's hard to see the forest and, for the trees. And if you're in it and it's just writing, and it's hard to sometimes know what it is. I think a lot of people go through that. Like, this is hard, but
Know what
you're
is.
in it.
You said know
Yeah.
what it is. What does that mean?
Well,
What are you
just like
referring to?
to like see the thing for what it is, right? So like if I think of a
Writer's
particular
block
client.
or
No, the like when you talk about a difficult manuscript,
oh, okay.
right? And like I to think of someone very specifically as writing a memoir about her abusive mother and her absentee father, and she was just struggling with. She wanted just some technical help on how to get past the parts of the story that weren't coming out. And I said, well, this might not be technical help. This is. And she said,
Hmm.
well, what do you mean? And I said, well, this is really hard stuff. Like, are you sure that every time you come to the table to write, you're in the mental health or the emotional health state to dive into it? And she kind of looked at me like,
What do you
oh,
mean?
like it didn't occur to
Yeah.
her that
Uh-huh.
her story was hard. And I thought, like, step back from it. Like, if you're writing something complicated or emotionally taxing, or sometimes I find that people, when they do historical fiction or something that's got a research element, that research steals a bit of their energy. Like, sit back and look at what the project is before you start calling it writer's block. It might just be your body and brain trying to take care of itself.
And also, I mean, burnout is a real thing in this culture.
Yeah.
And if that is speaking to your comment about are you in an emotional stable place to write this scene, maybe you do need to take a break from writing for a day, a week, a month, whatever your body and mind needs to get over, to recover from the burnout, whatever caused that burnout. I
Right.
mean, it
Right.
could be writing a book a month, that kind of burnout. It could be trying to, do side hustle and work full time and take care of aging parents. It could be, your burnout could be from anything, writing related or not,
Right.
but it's
Right.
still going to manifest maybe on the page for you.
Right.
I
I
did
think,
remember another
oh,
time I had writer's block. It was that whole
oh,
short story thing. Do you
oh,
remember when
right.
I was trying to get into
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
anthology?
Yeah.
So not ready to write the story, or maybe you're just trying really hard to write something that you're just not into. It's
Right.
trying to squish yourself into a label or a box that is not you. If you're having trouble writing something, maybe it's because you're not supposed to write it
Right. Right. Yes.
at
If
that
we're going to
moment
talk about
anyway,
if we're going to talk about ways out of writer's block, that might be one of them, and that is toss it. Toss the scene, toss the project. That's heartbreaking to think of, but I think if you fall too deep into the hole of I have writer's block, that threatens writing for you. So better to throw the story away than the idea of yourself as a writer. And I think that for an unfortunate number of people, that writer's block becomes like a terminal illness, and they give up. That's not okay. I'm not into that. I have kind of a cure for writer's block, not a cure for it, but like a way to get out of it. And I was thinking about it as you were talking, but like, why is it that I don't have it? And I think one of the things, I don't get it often, and probably this goes for you too. There are many things you do as a writer that feeds you as a writer that don't happen at the desk or the page or the keyboard or whatever. And I think to give yourself some freedom to, like, if you can't write the words, that's one thing. Go for a walk, sit down at a table, write out ideas, daydream. These kind of things tend to feed the story well. If the story well is coming up dry, find the way that feeds it for you. Um, there's a great quote that I remember seeing. A writer is working when he or she is staring out the window, and I remember seeing that and thinking, like, okay, that's great, because that's where the story comes from. It's the daydream. It's the daydream that leads into the what if, that leads into the story, that probably can unlock that hard piece that you're stuck on, right? And if you're always trying to do that at the page, like, hands on the keyboard or pen in hand, it might not be the best place to cultivate creativity. You might need to find another place to do that.
I like that. Finding a different space that feeds, I hate to say the muse, but
But
you're
it's
sitting at your
true, right?
desk in your home office does not get words on the page, but going to Starbucks does. Go to Starbucks.
I always think of that David Lynch quote where he was talking about working on Blue Velvet, the movie, great movie. And I don't know if this is just David Lynch being kind of weird and sort of like magical, but he says it was a hot day. He was listening to two actors talk, and he put his hand on the hood of a car, and he leaned back, and he says in that moment he got the entire idea for Twin Peaks.
Mm.
And that's a little bit of magical realism, I'm sure, right? He didn't the entire plot of Twin
Hyperbole.
Peaks. Right. Definitely some hyperbole there. But David Lynch's point to me is he was open and receptive. He was in a place that was cultivating his imagination, and he had primed the well, and that moment came together. So it's not going to be that magical for you. It may be that magical for you. You can tell that story when you're done writing the book and you're at your signing. You can say, well, I was doing the dishes one day, and then all of a sudden this whole domestic drama came out for me, and like, you can tell that story later, but don't lose the fact that, like, that might be just being in a space that's unique and different and inspiring will break something loose, something big.
Going back to underlying causes, I just briefly touched on fear, but what I mean by that, I guess, is so when I find myself procrastinating something, it's usually because I'm afraid that what I write won't be any good, which is not founded. Like, it's just a glitch in the matrix.
Right.
It's not based in reality or anything. I'm a good writer. I know that. But, when you're trying to create something new and you want it to be mind blowing or like the best thing this person's ever read, like, that's a lot of pressure. So if I can take that part out somehow and disengage that piece of me that has that um, wish, I guess, and bring it back in the revision stage, but during the drafting stage to let that go, take off that editor hat.
Right.
I also
Right.
have I've run across people, colleagues, clients, this is pretty regular actually. Like and it's not just for writing either, like painters and potters and stuff have this same thing. When you have a vision of what you want your piece of art to look like in your head, and then you go to put it on the page or in the clay and it doesn't show up the way you want, like, this is the picture in my head and I can't paint it with words or paint or whatever. And that's discouraging. And I think that often stops a writer, I think.
Yes.
So getting past that discouragement can be, like you said, filling the well, getting some help from somebody else, like collaborate through, talk to another author friend, get a coach, or, like you said, go on retreat, get
Yeah.
a different perspective, um, or address like the energy that you need for the project. If you're a starter and you have all these ideas and you've got, outlines for all these series or whatever, but you're not actually, completing anything, then that's the type of energy that you need to focus on, and finding ways to power through the hard stuff and
Yeah.
the ritualistic part of sitting down every day and doing the work. I mean, that's the harder part, I guess.
Yeah.
I did discover something about myself just this last week that was
Mm.
exercise related, but I think it fits with this conversation actually. So I've been trying to like get to the gym for forever and start a yoga practice again forever. And I've tried on lots of different modalities and tried to like motivate myself, and nothing's worked for the last, I don't know, 6 years or something. But consistently anyway, I want to say. But I
Right.
think I've decided, or not decided, but I think I've realized that after talking to one of my friends, that what she saw me do with like exercise and diet and nutrition in the past has always been like challenge related. So
Mm.
like I would do a cleanse, or I would start a new type of, diet, or I would, I'd have a program that I would follow.
Right.
And that always motivated me somehow externally. And I'll take that, So
Right.
I've
Right.
started, you know, yeah, I have this program now that I'm working on, this challenge I'm giving myself. Rowing. We have a rowing machine. And so I've set up this challenge for myself. And there's an end date, and as soon as
Right.
that happens, then I'll be done with that. And then I can start a new challenge. And so I think it's the project that inspires me, not just going to the gym 3 times a week.
Right.
Like, you know what
Right.
I
Because
mean?
that's
And
an
so
indeterminate outcome. I'm just
right.
going to the gym.
So
Right.
having a project that you're working on with an end date might help, or coming up with some way that motivates